These cars belong to your brother now. My father's voice boomed across the bookstore, cutting through the excited chatter of my first book launch. Sign the papers, Alexandra. My hand trembled as I gripped the podium, staring at the transfer documents he'd slammed down in front of me. My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and at 28, I'd finally achieved my dream of publishing my first novel. The small independent bookstore was packed with readers eager to get their copies signed. But instead of celebrating, I was watching my family try to strip away the last connection I had to my grandfather. "I won't sign anything," I said firmly, though my voice shook. "Grandpa left those cars to me for a reason." My brother Marcus stood behind our father, his usual smug smile in place. At 25, he'd never worked a day in his life, bouncing between failed get-rich-quick schemes and finding himself. Yet somehow, he was always their golden child. "Your brother has a real business opportunity," Mom chimed in, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the signing table. "These cars could set him up for life. You're just being selfish, as usual." The collection in question wasn't just any set of vintage cars. My grandfather had spent his life restoring classic automobiles, building a collection worth millions. He taught me everything about them, spending weekends showing me how to maintain each vehicle, sharing the history behind every model. When he passed last year, he left the entire collection to me, much to my family's shock. "This isn't about business opportunities," I said, turning to address the uncomfortable crowd. "I'm so sorry, everyone. We'll resume the signing in a moment." But Dad wasn't finished. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "You ungrateful little." He reached for my newly published books, the special first editions I'd had printed for this launch. Before I could stop him, he was throwing them into the decorative fireplace the bookstore used for ambience. "No," I lunged forward, but it was too late. The flames caught the pages, curling them into ash. My heart shattered watching my dream literally go up in smoke. "Now," Dad said, his voice cold, "maybe you'll understand what's important. Family comes first, Alexandra. Sign the papers." I stared at the burning books, something inside me hardening. For years, I'd watched them favor Marcus, dismiss my achievements, and try to control my life. But this time, they'd gone too far. "Security," I called out, my voice stronger than I felt. "Please escort them out." The bookstore's security guard, who'd been watching nervously, stepped forward. My father's face turned purple with rage. "You're choosing this over your family? Over your brother's future?" "No, Dad," I replied, straightening my spine. "I'm choosing myself for once, and those cars, they're not just vehicles to be sold. They're Grandpa's legacy, his passion, something you never understood." As security led them toward the door, Marcus turned back. "You'll regret this, sis. Those cars should be mine. I know what they're worth." What my brother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already taken precautions. My grandfather hadn't just left me the cars, he'd left me his wisdom too. "Keep everything documented, Allie," he told me shortly before he passed. "People show their true colors when there's money involved." I'd followed his advice, installing security cameras in the private garage where the collection was stored. Every visit my family made, every attempt to access the vehicles, every threatening conversation, it was all recorded. I'd also done something else, something that would make tomorrow very interesting. That evening, after salvaging what I could from the launch and apologizing profusely to the bookstore owner, I received a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Mitchell, this is James Sullivan from Heritage Insurance. We need to discuss the incident at your book launch. Your grandfather's policy is very specific about threats to his beneficiary. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. I smiled, remembering the special clause Grandpa had added to his insurance policy, the one that stated any attempt to coerce or threaten the rightful heir would trigger an immediate investigation. My phone buzzed again, this time with messages from my parents. "You're making a huge mistake. Your brother needs this opportunity. Family should come first." I turned off my phone and looked at the burnt remains of my books. Tomorrow would change everything, but not in the way my family expected. Grandpa had taught me more than just about cars. He taught me how to stand up for myself, and I was finally ready to do just that. The next morning, I arrived at the private garage where Grandpa's collection was housed, finding James Sullivan from Heritage Insurance already waiting. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 50s, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression that meant business. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. I've reviewed the preliminary footage from last night's incident. Your grandfather's foresight was remarkable. Before we could continue, my family's cars pulled into the lot. Dad emerged first, looking confident as ever, followed by Mom and Marcus. Their expressions faltered slightly when they saw Mr. Sullivan. "This is private family business," Dad announced, puffing up his chest. "I'll have to ask you to leave." Mr. Sullivan's smile was razor sharp. "Actually, Mr. Mitchell, I'm exactly where I need to be. Your father-in-law's insurance policy has some very specific clauses about the protection of his collection and its rightful heir." I watched my brother's smug expression waver. "Insurance policy? What insurance policy?" "Perhaps we should all step inside," Mr. Sullivan suggested, gesturing to the garage's office. "There's quite a bit to discuss." Inside, surrounded by photographs of Grandpa with his beloved cars, Mr. Sullivan opened his briefcase. Mr. Edward Mitchell Sr. took out a comprehensive insurance policy on his collection 5 years ago. However, this wasn't just about protecting the vehicles. He pulled out a document, sliding it across the desk. Section 7, Paragraph 3 specifically states that any attempt to coerce, threaten, or force the designated heir to relinquish their inheritance will trigger an immediate investigation and potential legal action. My father's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. We're her family." "Yes," Mr. Sullivan nodded, "which is exactly why your father-in-law added this clause." He seemed to anticipate this situation. Mom's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Edward always was difficult about these cars. He never understood that Marcus has a natural talent for business. I couldn't help but laugh. Natural talent? Marcus doesn't even know how to change a tire. That's not true. Marcus protested, but his face flushed. Mr. Sullivan raised an eyebrow. "Shall we take a look at the collection? I'd like to verify its condition." We walked through the climate-controlled garage where 12 pristine vintage cars sat gleaming under specialized lighting. Each one had been lovingly restored by my grandfather, and each had its own story that he'd shared with me. "Can you tell me about this one?" Mr. Sullivan asked, stopping beside a 1957 Ferrari 250 GT. Before Marcus could speak, I stepped forward. "Grandpa found this one in a barn in Italy, spent 3 years restoring it, had to track down original parts from all over Europe. The paint is period correct, and he even located the original leather supplier for the interior." Mr. Sullivan nodded approvingly, making notes. "And this one?" He pointed to a 1963 Aston Martin DB5. That was his pride and joy. I smiled, running my hand along the perfectly maintained hood. "We spent every Sunday working on it when I was in high school. He taught me how to rebuild the engine block by block." My father interrupted. "This is all very touching, but these cars are wasted just sitting here. Marcus has investors lined up." "Whoa. Who what?" I turned to face him. "Who want to flip them for quick cash. These aren't just commodities, Dad. They're pieces of history, each with their own story. Grandpa didn't spend his life collecting and restoring them just so Marcus could sell them to the highest bidder." Mr. Sullivan cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." He pulled out another document. "The insurance policy includes a maintenance clause. The heir must demonstrate knowledge of proper care and maintenance of the collection. Shall we test that?" Marcus's face went pale. Mom stepped forward quickly. "This is unnecessary. We're just trying to do what's best for the family." "No," I said firmly. "You're trying to do what's best for Marcus, like always. But not this time." Mr. Sullivan walked to the Ferrari. "Mr. Mitchell Jr., perhaps you could explain the proper startup procedure for a vehicle of this vintage." Marcus stared at the car like it might bite him. "You just turn the key." I watched my parents' faces fall as Mr. Sullivan made more notes. This was just the beginning, and for once, I wasn't backing down. Grandpa had made sure of that. The aftermath of Mr. Sullivan's visit was swift and decisive. The insurance report confirmed what Grandpa had known all along. I was the only one qualified to maintain his legacy. But the real bombshell came when Mr. Sullivan revealed the final clause of the policy. "Your grandfather added a trust provision," he explained, pulling out one last document. "The collection can never be sold as a whole or broken up for individual sale without meeting specific conditions. If any attempt is made to force a sale, the entire collection would be automatically donated to the National Automotive Museum." My father slumped in his chair, the fight finally draining from him. Marcus stormed out, slamming the garage door so hard that the windows rattled. Mom just sat there, her perfectly composed facade cracking as she realized their plan had completely backfired. "There's more," Mr. Sullivan continued. "The destruction of Ms. Mitchell's property at the book launch has triggered a liability clause. Heritage Insurance will be covering the cost of reprinting her first editions, plus damages." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Even from beyond, Grandpa was still protecting me, still making sure I could stand on my own feet. 2 weeks later, I stood in the garage, supervising the installation of new security systems. The bookstore had graciously agreed to host another launch event, this time with proper security in place. My reprinted first editions had arrived, and pre-orders had actually increased after word of the incident spread through the local literary community. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" I hesitated before responding. When we met at a local coffee shop, my brother looked different, humbled, perhaps for the first time in his life. "I didn't know," he said quietly, stirring his coffee. "About you and Grandpa, about all the time you spent together. I just saw dollar signs when I looked at those cars." "That's exactly why he left them to me," I replied. "They were never about money for him. They were about passion, dedication, learning to care for something bigger than yourself." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've been thinking, maybe you could teach me?" "Not for the money," he added quickly, seeing my expression. I missed out on knowing this side of Grandpa. Maybe it's not too late to understand what he was trying to show us." It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. Over the next few months, I began teaching Marcus the basics of car maintenance. He was clumsy at first, but surprisingly eager to learn. Our parents took longer to come around. Mom appeared at my second book launch, standing quietly in the back. This time, instead of criticism, she bought a copy and asked me to sign it. "Your grandfather would be proud," she whispered before slipping away. Dad was the last holdout, but even he eventually showed up at the garage one Sunday afternoon, watching silently as I taught Marcus how to change the oil in the Aston Martin. "You know," he said finally, "your grandfather tried to teach me once." I was too proud to listen, too focused on what I thought was important. I missed out on something special. I handed him a wrench. It's never too late to learn. The following spring, I hosted a classic car show at the garage, showcasing Grandpa's collection and donating the proceeds to a local technical school's automotive program. As I watched families explore the exhibits, I caught sight of a young girl, maybe 12, staring in awe at the Ferrari. "Want to learn how it works?" I asked her. Her eyes lit up, reminding me of myself at that age. Her parents watched nervously as I opened the hood, but soon they were all gathered around, listening as I shared the car's story. Grandpa's story. Marcus helped with the demonstrations, showing kids how to check oil levels and explaining basic engine components. He'd come a long way from the brother who only saw dollar signs. That evening, as the sun set over the garage, I found myself sitting in the Aston Martin, running my hands over the steering wheel Grandpa had restored so carefully. I could almost hear his voice. "Sometimes, Allie, the most valuable things in life aren't things at all. They're the lessons we learn, the passions we share, and the legacy we leave behind." He was right, of course. The cars were never just cars. They were vessels for something much more important: love, knowledge, and the courage to stand up for what matters. My family had needed this wake-up call, this chance to understand what Grandpa had known all along. As I locked up the garage that night, I smiled at the security cameras he'd insisted I install. "Thanks, Grandpa," I whispered, "for everything." My phone buzzed with a message from my publisher. My second book, a memoir about classic cars and family legacy, had just been picked up for publication. Life had come full circle, and this time, my whole family would be at the launch, ready to celebrate properly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's standing your ground until others finally see what was there all along.